Thank you, Chairman. And I just have a couple of questions for the, and I welcome the farm organisations here before us. Look, we know the massive price difference. We're talking about the price difference between the UK and Ireland. There was a pretty high difference between Ireland and Ireland, the Republic side of it, from in relation to the farmers of Cork South West, and here, because they left me known on certain terms that they were being asked to pay on incredible prices in comparison to places like Kildare and others, and it was shocking there early on there. I think things have levelled out some bit, which is most welcome. You know, we're talking about blaming the war, but prices are on the rise in 2021. So I don't know, like, is it altogether the war we can point the finger at? And you know, the prices of fuel have gone down now. So I can still see why we'll say urea in the UK is about 5.29 a tonne. In Ireland it was 800 to 850. It's now down to 650. It's still dearer, and why is that the case? And obviously we need transparency. We need to know, like farmers need to know that. The dairy farmers are struggling at this present time, as well as the suckler and the sheep farmer, and they need to know, like, what their transparency and what's going on in terms of margins, price gouging, unfair practices, and what the profits have been made. So the question, a couple of questions I want to ask the organisations: do you agree that with the Minister, when it looks like he does not intend to investigate what is going on in the fertiliser market, number one? And number two, do you think that the Consumer Protection Agency should carry out an investigation? You know, the astonishing price differences, unfair on the menace. You know, I was talking to a lady on the phone a while ago. She said her son is out all night. He has 2 young children. He's working, basically, pardon my language, he's butt off. He's struggling to survive as a dairy farmer, and she has serious concerns. Her own son, who's married with young kids, working all the hours God's in, and very little money, very little profit to be made after all that type of work. And now we find that, you know, fertiliser at the price it is putting extra stress and extra strain. It was savage last year, but this year there's a lot of unfair differences, and I don't think the Minister is right by walking away from this. And I think that the Consumer Protection Agency, personally myself, should be investigating this. What are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Okay, that's Deputy Collins' questions. We're going to have to suspend. We have a vote in it all. Deputy Collins' questions, please.
Yeah, so the first question, I think, Deputy, was that should the Minister investigate the price disparity? Yeah. I think the answer to that is very simple, yes. I said if you look at some of the statistics we pulled out in terms of the difference in price between North and South, and UK and Ireland, and even, you know, some even regional differences. But I suppose the figure that sticks out with me in particular around this is that peak gas price. So since peak, gas price has reduced 80%, and in the UK, fertiliser has come down 50% in the same period. In France, it looks like it's 50%. In Ireland, it's only 10%. So that's massive. A couple of figures we have just offhand here is for a tonne of urea for February 23, and these are CSO stats. Tonne of urea was costing approximately 905 tonne in Ireland, and then according to AHDB stats in the UK, in February 23, the same product was costing €589. So that's 407 euro a tonne disparity, and they're importing their urea the same as we're importing our urea. So there is an issue there, there is no doubt, and the Minister and the Department should be investigating that. The question then, the second question, Deputy, I think it was around, is there a role for the Competition Authority in this? Is that correct? Yeah. And I suppose they definitely have a role in this. I suppose people would look at the Competition Authority and the Consumer Protection Authority, and it'll be quite regularly about the cost of food or the cost of insurance and things like that, but it does have a role in looking at what the issue around wholesale price for farmers and even other sectors. But in this particular issue, I would say that the Competition Authority would seem to have a role in this, yes.
Mr. McCormick.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Collins, for your question and your acknowledgement, I suppose, of the fact that dairy farmers are under a significant income price squeeze at this point in time as well, and hope that will lead to your support in calling for dairy farmers to be part of the fodder scheme. Obviously, you know, and I'll take the two together, whether it is the Minister and Brian has alluded to the various differentials in price there on fertiliser, or whether it is Consumer Protection Commission would investigate the 2023 figures, and I alluded to there in the opening remarks that, you know, we needed to have a look at 2022 as well, because we saw co-ops and private entities, and in particular co-ops, I suppose, closed for quotations on a Tuesday and opened the following Monday with no inward movement of stock and a significant upward movement in price. So there certainly was a degree of jumping on the bandwagon there. I suppose what's important here is whether it is or the Minister and the Consumer Protection Commission, that when the findings are gathered, that there's action. We cannot afford to let cobwebs gather because there's potential out there for repeats again. And, you know, we are on the periphery of Europe. We're producing a niche product that John Keane mentioned earlier from grass, but we are quite exposed when it comes to input costs. And, you know, I refer to a paper this week where the headline was that we were the most expensive for energy, electricity within Europe as well. So, you know, we needn't confine it to fertiliser. There are a number of inputs out there that need to be investigated based on an escalation of prices when gas went up, and an absence of significant reductions and timely reductions when gas prices went down.
ICSA.
Thank you, Chair. It's something we've repeatedly mentioned here from an ICSA perspective in recent years in various contexts. The level of scrutiny of farmers is to the very minute detail, whether that be, you know, aerial monitoring every 5 days, inspections on various levels. But when it comes to bigger business, there seems to be no appetite at Brussels or Dublin level for anywhere near the same level of scrutiny or for anywhere near the same level of transparency. And when we do get some progress, it seems to come very slowly, years down the line, and begrudgingly. And this is not, in our view, acceptable. So if we look at the fertiliser situation, and some of the other speakers there have alluded to the differential between UK and Ireland, I would point to April 2022, when UK price for urea was 1,065 converted to euros, 1,065. Ireland was 1,157, about a 90 gap. But after April 22, urea price steadily came down in the UK. It went down below the 1,000 in May and gradually came down bit by bit, month by month. We managed in Ireland to have, and these are CSO statistics, not pick and match figures, urea kept at above 1,000. Now, obviously, as you move on in the year, it becomes less significant. But it became again very significant this year when we began the year, when urea is in demand, and we found that we were still, you know, up against high 900s for urea. The UK started out with a big drop in urea price in 2023, down to about 657, and by March was down to 529 per tonne. A lot of urea was bought by farmers at the time they need it for in the order of 900. Now, okay, today it's down at 650, but it's a bit late in the day. Similar figures can be produced there. They're in our submission about potash, and similar comments can be made about the compounds as well. So that does give the argument that we need more transparency around this market. Is it the consumer, the Competition and Consumer Authority? Yes, I think they should look at why we managed to keep, you know, the price of urea so high in this country when the international market would say otherwise. And, you know, it's not just natural gas. Yeah, natural gas peaked in August 2022 at $9.75 per million British thermal units, and then rapidly fell after that. And in 2023 is $2.40. So it's actually at a kind of a 10-year low natural gas price. When it was very high last year, there was some cut back in production in Europe because of the cost of it, and that perhaps explains some of the issues in 2022. But that's all over now, and we have full productivity, or should have full productivity, and we need more transparency around that. A key point is that farmers are being given conflicting messages, and we don't seem to have any good sense of where the trade is going. So a lot of farmers bought fertiliser in the back end of 2022 because the signals they were getting was it won't even be available in 2023. And so they paid way too much for it to store it in their yards, and now we're in a disaster. You know, they've lost substantial money on that. Just one other thing to say as well, because I think this should be brought into the equation, is EU has been very slow about tackling fertiliser. There was, some really disappointing beating around the bush in 2022. There is a kind of a sense that fertiliser is almost a dirty word in the new Green Deal. But we have to have balance between food security, productivity, and so on. And I think, just to say, the demand for the liming subsidy, 25,000 farmers is evidence that farmers are committed to the sustainability agenda. So I just want to say that. But the EU has finally suspended the import tariff on urea and ammonium, except from Russia and Belarus, but that's okay, which was 6.5% and 5.5% respectively. So all of these things are telling us, and that happened in December 22, that we should have been getting fertiliser for substantially less in the spring of this year, and now it's almost too late, and it really does have to be investigated, and we should have transparency in big business as well as transparency around what farmers do.
Okay, Mr. Keane.
I think most of the points have been covered, but just in terms of the Minister and the Department, we would feel it would be quite important that they do investigate the matter. I think when you see the disparity, as we mentioned in their opening remarks, between North and South, and between ourselves and the continent, and between ourselves and England, and then you see the rate of change that happened in a short number of days, particularly in the spring of 22, as Pat referred to. We had a close of sales in a number of different places on 2 different occasions, and you had a couple of €100 of an increase in the space of 3 or 4 working days. The important piece of this, though, is to establish the cause and effect of this, and the reality and the impact that there is on farmers. We see that the upstream supply chain to farmers lacks transparency and clarity in this regard. And the downstream supply chain from farmers after the product leaves the farm gate also has significant lack of clarity and transparency in it. Yet what goes on inside the farm gate, we know down to the full stop and the dotted I and the cross T. So I know the Office of Fairness and Transparency is to be established to look at downstream and to some upstream effect as well. But in terms of the farmer being squeezed in the middle by the lack of clarity at both sides of it, it really highlights, I suppose, the lack of investment, the lack of intention, and the lack of ambition to try and support that squeezed middle piece. So one-off investigation is something which we would support, but there needs to be a more all-encompassing approach to ensure that the clarity that farmers bring to what goes on inside the farm gate is echoed in all aspects of inputs, upstream supply into farmers, and also the downstream. Thanks, Chairman.
Mr. Roddy.
Yes, look, I think most of this has been covered, and definitely, as I think John and Eddie in the last two speakers did make an excellent point to add to it as regards the impact for farmers, and the fact that the compliance levels that they have to adhere to, and those same compliance levels don't seem to be enacted in other parts of the supply chain. Is the Competition Authority the place to go? Probably. Maybe Deputy Collins, you and others in here may be better placed to assess on that, but we definitely support that. I think if we go back, if we are doing this, I suppose it's at what point do we start? We definitely need to go back to 2021 at the very least, and probably before that. And I know, when we do talk, we are seeing the price that is coming down. I think everyone will acknowledge that. But I do often think if we didn't have the north of the border there. It's enough to say how much would those prices have come down. And even as the prices are coming down, we're still seeing significant differences. I know, for example, last week, Cutswort 24, 2.5 10 was, we were getting, the average was working out about 700, 750 a tonne. Now the equivalent, we understand from Northern Ireland, it's hard to get an exact equivalent, but the equivalent, which is, from Northern Ireland, 24.55, we understand was able to sell in West Mayo, delivered at 630 a tonne. So that's €120 of difference. And look, that's clearly a discrepancy that is not helping the farmers. So I think, yes, as you say, Deputy Collins, we do need to look at an investigation into this. Thank you.
Okay.